Well, hey everybody, Brian Goulet here of gouletpens.com, here for episode number 270 of Goulet Q&A. This week I'm going to be talking to you about interesting pen materials, ink for colorblind people, and what to gift an experienced pen enthusiast, among other things. So things that I've been up to this week: went with the family, visited Rachel's parents. They live up in the Washington, D.C. kind of metro area, and there's a big farm up there called Cox Farms. If you're from that area, you probably heard of it, but it's like a fall festival type thing. They have all kinds of, slides and kettle corn and apple cider donuts and the whole deal. So took the kids there. It's kind of become like a tradition for our family of sorts. They're open like all season long. It's almost like a small amusement park at this point. But it was a lot of fun. Kids made some good memories. Got to see Rachel's family. It was really, really good. And then this week we did a ropes course, like as a team building type thing with our Goulet leadership. That was really interesting. Rachel and I are both still a little sore because we just did it yesterday, but still feeling good about that. So it was kind of interesting. I hadn't really done anything like that in a long time. I did some like rope type stuff back when I was in the Corps of Cadets at Virginia Tech. Very different experience back then, mainly getting yelled at, but it was still a lot of fun. So that was pretty interesting. And then speaking of Virginia Tech, Rachel and I are going to be going back there this coming weekend, actually. We're going to be there for its homecoming season. We're not looking to host it. I thought about doing a meetup or some kind of event. It's going to be so crazy there with homecoming, and we're going to have our kids and stuff like that. So we're not actually doing a meetup or an event, but if you happen to be going to the game, you might see us there. But anyway, we're going because I'm actually going back to speak to some of the cadets over there at the Corps Cadets. First time that I've done that, so that's kind of cool, and it'll be the first time that we've been back in 10 years and first time that we've ever taken our kids to the campus. So it's me and Rachel's alma mater, both of us. So it's fall football season, stuff like that. So it should be kind of interesting. We're not like really sports people, so I really don't keep up with the team or anything, even though it's our alma mater. So I really don't care who wins, but I just know that it's going to be quite an experience for the young ones to be there at Lane Stadium with 60 some odd thousand people. Should be pretty interesting. So anyway, things that we've had going on in the pen world. Well, we have an ink deal going on. Not sure if I mentioned that in Q&A yet. I don't think I have. But anyway, we've done this the last couple of years with Monteverde ink. This year we're doing a 30 milliliter ink bottle because it's just a little easier to ship, a little easier to manage. We're going to have more color options and stuff for you. So in the past we've done an 80 ml bottle. Now we got a 30 ml. So you get a free Monteverde ink with any Monteverde, Conklin, Stipula, Peniter, Diplomat, Nettuno, and Mayora pen. So basically anything that Jaffa, the distributor who owns Monteverde, we are doing a deal with all of their pens. So anything that they have is there. That's why it's so many random brands. That's how it works. So we've got that going now through basically the end of the year. So if you were interested in any of those brand pens, you get a little extra boost there. Another new thing that we've had coming in, I'll talk about this in more detail, but the Noodler's Triple Tail pen. Last I checked, I'm shooting this as of Wednesday afternoon. We launched it today and they're all gone. So we probably have none of them if you're checking on the site. We're trying to get more. Who knows? It's a new Noodler's pen. It's probably not going to be hugely widely available, but we did do a right now on it. Drew and I did on Wednesday just to explain it because it's a new pen and got some interesting things going on. Not trying to like overhype the pen because I know a lot of you are probably going to be like, Brian, I want this pen now. Where is it? I can't find it anywhere. Sorry about that. But we're trying to educate you a little bit about it. But that's a good sign that so many people are interested in it because that means that Noodlers will probably be incentivized to make more. So that's pretty cool. You can get more details on that on the right now. The Peniter Forged Carbon, which unfortunately did not arrive into our shop in time for me to shoot this and show you on Wednesday afternoon, but it's a pretty cool looking pen. First mass-produced forged carbon pen that I am aware of in the world. So pretty cool. Definitely Dante's cooking up some interesting stuff. You have to check that out. It's pretty rad. Basically, I've only seen this forged carbon concept on like super high-end exotic sports cars and stuff like that. So really cool effect if you're into carbon fiber at all. So we'll have that hopefully by the time this video launches, if everything arrives okay. We have a Diplomat Arrow that's going to be orange and black. If you're thinking it looks pretty much like an orange cap on a black pen, it's kind of what it is. Or if it's the other way around, I can't remember. So anyway, if you're interested in that kind of like Halloween type themes, I don't think that's necessarily why they did the orange and black thing. It just kind of works out. That is right before Halloween, but if you're into that, we've got that. And then the Aurora Oceani Atlantico, so that's like the blue Oceani. Man, those pens are beautiful. We should have those Atlanticos in soon. I don't know exactly when. And then we're gonna have TWSBI ink relatively soon. So you're like, oh, TWSBI's got ink now? Yeah, they're doing some TWSBI ink. So I haven't actually played with any of it yet because I haven't seen it for myself, but I know it's coming and the bottles are pretty cool. So it should be interesting. Definitely a future right now topic, I feel like. All right, so let's get to the questions for this week. Starting out with some pen and writing ones at Batman on Twitter. What are some new and interesting materials that you would like to see pen bodies made out of? I'd like to see a canvas, micarta, or maybe a sandcast pen. I don't know what sandcast is. I'm assuming it's sand that's cast into some sort of resin. Not unlike, Homo sapiens, like the basaltic lava cast there. It could be something similar to that. That'd be kind of cool. I could definitely see like a lot of pen materials that have something cast into resin, right? Like resin has opened up a lot of doors for different types of materials. You definitely see some of that in the like independent pen maker space. In fact, some of this is like, oh man, I'm like dusting off cobwebs back from the day, because I actually did some resin casting myself back a decade plus ago when I was making pens. Yeah, I like casted some resin and cast some interesting things. I did like a money pen. I took like shredded money and I cast that into resin. So that kind of a cool effect. Had a lot of bubbles though. Casting things in resins is tough. But I built like a pressure pot, vacuum pot, and all these things. What else did I do? I did circuit board pens are pretty cool. So it's like an actual circuit board, 3-dimensional, that you heat up, turn around a tube, and then you cast it in resin. That looks pretty rad. What else did I do? Steel wool. That looked kind of interesting. Was not so easy on the tools when I was turning those. So there's all kinds of neat stuff there. You can really kind of dream as far as what, I guess, how long would it last and how well would it set in the resin. That's a whole other story. But I feel like there's a lot of interesting stuff there. The canvas thing is interesting. Canvas micarta. I don't know if that's the same thing as regular micarta, if it's called canvas micarta. But TWSBI did a pen out of micarta. I think micarta is like a branded material, sort of like, Kleenex is to tissue. Basically if you have like a cotton linen weave, cast thing, I think that's basically what micarta is, but I think micarta is like a branded thing. Sort of like Macrolon is like a polycarbonate, but Macrolon is the brand, or plexiglass, like that's the brand. So a lot of interesting things. I don't know, just a little interesting point there with micarta. So I don't know, that could be interesting. Maybe denim. I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen a denim pen. Just feels like that'd be kind of cool. Not like a loose cloth, but I don't know, it feels like if you could do a cotton linen of some kind in a micarta, maybe you could do something with denim. How well would that do? That would probably stain really bad. I don't know. So that's the thing with materials for pens, as opposed to other things, or specifically fountain pens, is you have to worry about stainability and like durability and stuff like that. I definitely think some like modern celluloid alternative would be good. Like, I'm talking like the cellulose nitrate, that stuff. But I guess modern resins kind of is meant to emulate that a bit. But celluloid, there's some like vintage celluloids that they just look so good, like better than any modern resin material. So I don't know, maybe emulate some of those. The cotton, resin aspect of those cellulose nitrates. I think stone is cool as heck. Anytime I've seen like the Visconti Il Magnificos, anything that's like that, that's like actual stone, it's going to make the pen maybe a little heavy, maybe not. Depends on the stone, depends on how it's made. I've seen some stuff from like Monograppa. Definitely the Italian companies have done some things out of like marble or stuff like that. I could really get into those because I think they look kind of amazing. Would be a shame if you like dropped it in the parking lot kind of thing, but still could look kind of cool. I don't know, it might be kind of heavy. Maybe something like granite. I don't know. There's lots of cool granite materials out there. Like an amethyst crystal. I don't know, is that even possible? I have no idea. But that would be kind of cool, right? Or like a malachite. I've seen some malachite. I've seen some malachite that's been like fake malachite. Jade maybe. There's definitely some interesting stuff. If you get into like really high-end limited edition pens, some crazy stuff, then you get into some interesting stones and marbles and jewels and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm just dreaming. Why not? Ceramic or porcelain. I have a Lamy Lady that's made out of porcelain, which is kind of interesting, or ceramic. Definitely you get into some of the more durability aspects of it too. But I think you could get some pretty durable ceramics that could be feasible. I just don't know how practical it is to make that into like a tube shape for a pen. But I don't know, could be interesting. I think there's probably more that can be done with carbon fiber. I'm thinking like, carbon fiber for me for so long has been like, that carbon fiber weave pattern like you always associate. But, look at Peniter with the forged carbon fiber. I've seen some other, like unidirectional carbon fiber like Visconti's done on their torpedo. So there's definitely other techniques for doing carbon fiber, it seems now, than just the regular weave pattern. So I feel like it could be interesting. Maybe you could have carbon fiber like infused with other colors of weave in there to get some interesting effect. I don't know, there's probably a lot that could be done there that maybe you've seen in other automotive industries or things like that. That'd be kind of cool in a pen. Seen some like natural materials like woolly mammoth tusk that's like 50 or 70,000 years old. That gets really interesting. Get some cool things out of that. I've seen some of those that Monograppa's done. I've seen some of those that Eagle pens, they're a small manufacturer, but they've done some mammoth tusk. They've done mammoth tooth, which is kind of even a different thing. So lots of really cool things. And then I was just like, let me see what kind of like modern materials are out there that could be kind of crazy. So I just like Google search like 10 interesting new materials that are out there. Aerogel, I don't know if you've ever seen that stuff. It's like a super, super, super lightweight, very heat resistant, very strong material. I have no idea how feasible that would be in a pen, but an aerogel pen, that would be kind of interesting. Go ahead and Google that. From what I understand, the concept or the idea of 3D printing like a simulated diamond or some sort of simulated gem, apparently the technology may exist. Obviously exists to do like fake stones, man-made stones. I think it'd be interesting to have like some sort of man-made stone or gem or something like that actually made into like a pen shape. I have no idea if that's possible, but that would be kind of crazy, right? Like if you had like a ruby pen, I don't know, is that even feasible? Or like, what is it? Rachel got in her necklace with, forget what the name it was. It was basically called like a watermelon stone. So it's like all these different types of colors. It's almost like a rainbow type stone. It's a totally manufactured stone, but it was really, was it watermelon? I can't remember what it was. I think that might have been what it was called. But anyway, so just, I feel like you could do some interesting things like that with some manufactured material capabilities. Then thinking about some other things I've seen, especially I'm thinking about like in the knife world. Like G10 is a popular material in knives. Would it make sense in a pen? I don't know. But it would be interesting to try. I'm sure somebody's probably done that already. I'm just not aware of it. Damascus steel is pretty cool. That's like the folded kind of layered steel that you have in like, samurai swords and stuff like that. Or I bought a couple knives, kitchen knives from Japan when I was there that were Damascus steel. Looks so cool. Is not rust proof though, like stainless steel is. So that's the drawback in like a kitchen knife type setting. In a pen, you might have to be sensitive about that as well. But anyway, so I don't know. I'm just completely kind of riffing, thinking about what would be interesting. Surely there's lots of other cool stuff out there. Do you have any thoughts or ideas? I'm very curious to see. I feel like this is one area where like small pen makers can really push the envelope and make some interesting things, because obviously the feasibility of making something in mass production or having commercial appeal might not be practical for a company like Pilot, who makes lots and lots of pens. But if you can make one at a time, it might be more expensive, but you could prove a concept of having some really cool materials. So I feel like that's the place to look out for it, is the independent craftsmen that are more exploratory in their methods. All right. Next question. So this is Alan D on Facebook. Alan, I love your question. Fountain pens are a bother. Cleaning, tuning, nib decisions, misbehaving inks, burps, leaks, stained desk, stained fingers, expensive, etc. Yet we love them. Why do we love them anyway? Is there something psychological going on? I catch a hint of desperation here in Alan's response here. Well, okay, you're talking about like some of the most challenging aspects of fountain pen, right? Like, so, it's not like any fountain pen you use, you're gonna have all these issues and it's this huge pain. And it's just, we trudge through all of these terrible things about using fountain pens purely out of some sort of love or, psychological dysfunction in our brains. I mean, come on. No, there's certainly the potential to have some of these issues, but it's really not any different than owning a high-performance car or motorcycle, or having a really like a custom-made musical instrument that maybe is a little higher maintenance. Pretty much anything. If you have a really high-performing kind of a specifically tuned, specifically whatever manufactured instrument of any kind, it's going to be a little higher maintenance. You're going to have some byproducts of using it than that you might not, with a more conventional object. And I think some of that is, there's a law of diminishing returns when you're going for some specific type of experiential, thing, especially using a tool, that you are going to have to, basically endure or maybe pay a higher price for said things to get, kind of the peak experience of whatever it might be. So I think that's definitely what you're dealing with fountain pens. You're trying to get essentially the best analog writing experience that you can with your hands. I guess you could technically take a little further with like dip pens or something like that. You could argue whether that's the truest, most ideal writing experience, or whether fountain pens are kind of it. Personally, I'm a little biased. I think fountain pens are some of the best writing experience you can have, period. In like a pen in hand, kind of form. So, I think that it's worth the price because the payoff is there. There's some value that we have in actually connecting with what we're writing, or writing instruments depending on if they're manufactured by a certain company that we connect with, or a region of the world that we connect with, or just it allows our mental state to flow in a certain way based on how we're writing with that pen and how we're responding to it. I think that's the price to be paid. I think for those of us who really appreciate that experience, we're willing to spend the extra time, effort, money, whatever, to get it. And as it turns out, kind of the more you invest in the hobby, the more rewarding you're going to find that it is. Not unlike if you practice a musical instrument a lot, you're going to get better at it, and therefore you're going to get more reward out of when you do play it, because you can play more challenging things. Other people can benefit from the music you play, etc. I think it's kind of something similar with a writing instrument. I could also make a similar argument for many hobbies, that are often so many easier ways to kind of generally accomplish the things that you can do. But if you want to achieve kind of the pinnacle experience, there's going to be a more of an investment to be made in all senses of the word. To reflect back on my own youth, I was into car audio back when I was in high school. Probably haven't talked about that a whole lot in this pen setting here, but I was really into it. Like, I actually, back when Facebook was still for college students only, I created my own Facebook group in my local college, Virginia Tech. That was my car stereo is worth more than my car. That was my Facebook group contribution back in the day, because literally my stereo was worth more than the car itself. I have two 15-inch subwoofers in the trunk with custom-built boxes, in case you happen to care about that at all. And I did actually, I would set off car alarms, and I rattled off my own rear view mirror one time. I'd say car audio. I went to rather extreme measures to get kind of that sound quality that I was looking for. I would say more sound volume that I was looking for back in those days. I literally would take my entire car apart. I replaced all the speakers, the stuff, even some of the wiring. I had installed a capacitor because I had an amplifier that was drawing more than my battery could handle. So I had this like huge capacitor that was this big for my car stereo, because the lights would dim and everything when I would play loud songs. I even put like sound dampening, this like sticky like sound dampening stuff on the door panels because it would rattle so bad, and it would also help keep the sound kind of pure and contained and make it louder. So I went to rather extreme measures, way more than most people will be willing to pay to get that car audio experience. I would say the same kind of thing with fountain pens. You know, if you want to get such a level of experience, it would be the same kind of deal. Or if you're an audiophile, if you like to listen to home audio stuff and you like, you know, the vacuum tube audio with vinyl records and all this kind of stuff, like that is also kind of a pain. So I think it's like anything else. The investment is there if you're into the peak experience, so to speak. I don't know that there's like any type of like underlying disorder, like psychological thing going on. I think it's just that we all have our weird things that we get into, right? And for those of us who are really into pens, the pens are our weird thing, and we just love to get into it. And you know, we might get ink on our fingers, but whatever. It doesn't matter because we love the weird things that we're into. Just like if you love fixing cars, you're gonna get grease on your hands. That's just a part of working on cars. Same kind of thing with fountain pens. You love that experience, and that's what you're gonna get. So I think some of it's a labor of love, some of it's just the fountain pen experience. It is really a rite of passage for all of us, but we are all unified in that experience. And as you get better and more experience with it too, you don't have those experiences quite as much, the bad parts of it, and you get more of the good. Which again, that's the practice, that's the building, that's the learning. You get more of a payoff the more you invest into it. Cool? All right. This question is from Sanctuary Ag Eldon on Instagram. Is the Noodler's triple tail pen only available in clear, and can the nib fit on other Noodler's pens? Okay, great question. Covered a lot of this in Right Now on Wednesday. To be fair, you asked this question before we shot that Right Now. And in fact, your prompting of that question made me think it through a little more, talk with Drew, and we decided to turn it into a Right Now. So I will not duplicate everything I said in that already because there's a whole separate video on that. You can go find that out if you are interested. But for now, I can address at least what you said here. So is a triple tail only in clear? It is for us right now. I think Nathan may have made some other ones that he may have sold just one-on-one at the New England Pen Show. So I don't think there's anything mass available in anything other than clear. But if you look at all the other Noodler's pens, they started out in a clear version most of the time. Not every single pen, but usually they would start out in like a very limited color option and then expanded rapidly beyond that. Just looking at past history and knowing what inspires Nathan, wouldn't be surprised if we saw other colors, right? So I think that's something to look forward to. I don't have any specific knowledge of the next thing that might be coming out, if there is any other color or anything like that is coming. But it's something to maybe be on the lookout and keep an eye on our site. At this point, I'm just hoping we can get a steady supply of clear. And then the other question you asked is, can the nib fit in other Noodler's pens? So I think that we covered this pretty well in Right Now. But from what I was able to test in physically swapping the nibs, this one's a little bit different in that it actually has a screw-in housing, not unlike Edison, if you're familiar with any of those, or some of the Yovo, some of the Bach housings have that. So you can actually unscrew it, and the whole nib and feed is in there instead of being fit into the body or the grip of the pen itself. This is a breather tube here on the back, by the way. So that is kind of unique. This housing will be unique to this pen. I don't believe that this housing is interchangeable with any of them. So if you are to swap the nib out, you're gonna have to yank it out of the housing. You can leave the housing screwed into the grip, which I'm gonna try to do right now. When you're reassembling the housing in here, because of that breather tube, the breather tube's really hard to fit in because the tube wants to curl off to the side. The breather tube actually fits inside the hollow piston. So you gotta put the piston down and then screw it in place like so. We demonstrated this in the Right Now video as well. Boom. So if you want to yank this thing out of here, a rubber grip definitely helps a lot. Goulet grip or bike inner tube or whatever, rubber band or whatever you got, you can yank that out of there, nib and feed, voila. The nib shape here at the top is a little different than it is on some other Noodler's pens, than the Neponset or the Ahab or Conrad. But it appears that the base of the nib is the same and that it can fit in. Now, I have not thoroughly tested all of these for flow, but I have tested them just seeing for fit. If they're going to fit in the pen, do they fit firmly? Are they like falling out of the pen? Are they really tight to fit in there? they seem to be pretty identical. So without having done like the most thorough scientific testing of the fit of those nibs onto the different pens, I can say based on what I've tested, they seem to work well. Whether or not that's going to be worth it to you to buy a $55 pen and swap the nib onto another one, you know, is totally up to you. I think it's just a matter of, you know, is it possible? You know, just because I know we're going to get asked that question, I always like to try and figure that out. Okay, and then, yeah, there you go. So it does appear to fit. Noodler's triple tail. So very similar to an Ahab. It's like the size of the Nippon set, similar shape to an Ahab, contoured grip. So I am a fan, and it's the broadness that this nib can do is pretty impressive. And it seems to be just a little bit lighter touch too as well. So there you go. You can check those out. Probably at the airing of this video, we're out of stock of them. But hopefully we get restocked soon. If not, just sign up for the email notification list on our site. I would not be surprised if we see a lot of starter stepping of availability of this, because that has been the pattern of every new Noodler's model pen that we've ever had. Is, you know, it sells out, it sells out. We get a few more, it sells out, so we get a few more. You know, it's rare that we have a brand new Noodler's pen with just massive, massive, massive availability, right? It's usually kind of the other way. All right, Piece of Craft Leather on Instagram asked, which pens would established hobbyists not likely have? So gifting to fellow hobbyists is hard, in parentheses at the end of that question. Okay, Piece of Craft, I think that it totally depends on what somebody's already into. You know, there kind of isn't a universal answer. If you ask 10 fountain pen people, experienced fountain pen people, like what are the pens that everybody has, you might get different answers from a lot of them. I think niche hobbies like this are kind of notoriously hard to buy gifts for someone who's really into it, because the choices are so personal and they likely have a lot of what maybe they've already found an interest in. And if you're not into the hobby, boy, it's going to be kind of tough to pick the right thing for that person. You know, think about like my father-in-law is doing N-scale model trains right now. Pretty much people can't buy him anything related to that hobby without knowing specifically, like with a hyperlink, what product that it is that he's interested in, because we just don't know enough about the hobby. It's kind of like that for fountain pens, that people that aren't into fountain pens, they are going to take their best guess and probably buy the wrong thing for an experienced person. So it really depends who it's coming from and what that person's already into. You know, you can have experienced fountain pen person that doesn't have anything modern. They're purely into vintage pens, and anything modern would be new for them. Or the complete opposite. You could have somebody that's really into modern pens, but you buy them something vintage and it's a whole new world to them. So it kind of depends. It helps if you know a little bit about where their interest is. But if we don't know that and we just know that they're into pens, what the heck do you buy for them, right? So that's where I'm going to take this question a little bit. I think that this whole niche kind of interest thing, probably if you're into fountain pens, you may have a pattern of very specific interests, myself included. I'm reflecting about my own hobbies and interests. I'm like, obviously fountain pens, very, very, very strong interest of mine. Puzzles, not unlike what you see here. This is my latest puzzle, by the way. You probably saw this over in the corner. I just couldn't resist showing it off. This is called a Giga Minx, made by Very Puzzle, and it is really kind of over the top. I've super gotten into puzzles, and Rachel calls herself a puzzle widow. I think secretly I just wanted a way to try to work this into today's Q&A. This is not fully scrambled. All I did was kind of turn some of these pieces. So this is basically, it's kind of almost literally like a soccer ball. It's a mix of hexagons and pentagons. Anyway, 32 facets on that bad boy. I'm very excited. I haven't solved it yet. I'm gonna have to figure it out. It's gonna take me a while, and I love it. That's what I do to relax, if that tells you anything. So I'm really into puzzles. But Rachel's like, I'm not gonna buy you any puzzles. Like, I have so many already. They're all different, but not really to her. So I'm like, she's just not gonna get me anything unless I tell her what it is. I'm into woodworking with tools and stuff like that. Same kind of deal. Photography, gear, technology, same thing. Lego Technic. So I'm into all these things. I am impossible to buy for without being very explicit as to what it is that I need. So I'm also not, personally, I'm also not like, I don't need like super specific surprise gifts from people. It doesn't really ring my bell. So I'm very okay either A, not getting anything at all, getting something that's completely outside my hobbies that I also appreciate, or gift cards. That's something else that's always also good for me, related to whatever it is that I'm into, like a gift card to Woodcraft. Like, that's pretty good to go, or Home Depot. Like, I can definitely find something there. Anyway, so back to the topic at hand. I think maybe trying to get yourself a little bit of help. So doing a little research, if they're into something specific, it's good to do a little intel if you can. Maybe ask for a list of like 10 pens that they have their eye on, you know, maybe just to help narrow the scope a little bit. See what connects with you as the giver. Maybe there's something sort of meaningful related to what their general interest is. You know, I think it's okay for them to say like, hey, I'd really love to get you something fountain pen related, but I'm not sure exactly what to do. Can you give me a general idea or point me in a general direction of the things that you're interested in that could be meaningful? And then I'll pick something that I think is cool. That could be helpful. Still kind of a surprise, but also they would appreciate the fact that you're trying to learn deeper about what they want. You know, they won't be totally shocked as to what it is, but they could still be surprised, right? I think starting out, going more specifically into your question, you know, sometimes there's a fairly staple pen, like a Pilot Vanishing Point, Lamy 2000, TWSBI, Eco or 580, maybe a Conklin Durograph, Diplomat Magnum, Pilot Metropolitan, Lamy Safari, something like that. These are some pens that you might assume an experienced pen person would at least have interest in or awareness of. But maybe it's something that they don't have. Maybe it's something they skipped it, they missed it. Or maybe that they thought they might not like it. They thought they might not like it, so they didn't buy it for themselves, but it's so popular and so interesting. I'm thinking specifically like a Pilot Vanishing Point. A lot of people think I'm not going to like it, the click thing, or, you know, the holding the clip, you know, on the grip end of the pen. That's going to be weird, but it's actually pretty universally popular. So, you know, if you know for a fact that they have a pen like that they have skipped over, but it is kind of popular, like you can ask our team here at Goulet, or you can go to our website and you can just go to like all fountain pens and just sort by popularity. That can give you a pretty good idea of generally what's pretty good. So you can do a little bit of research on that end and just find out if they don't have said very popular pen, maybe they might be interested in. Just keep the receipt in case they change their mind. So that's, you know, that's there. It's a bit risky, you know, but they're pretty tried and true, these pens I just mentioned. So your odds are pretty good that they might like them. You could always buy a duplicate pen that they already have, but maybe in a different color or a different nib size, maybe a nib size that they don't have quite as much if you know they have a lot of fine. If they're hardcore and they're like, I absolutely only want stub nibs or whatever it might be, okay, maybe they might not want an extra fine. But if they have a few different things and they're okay adventuring a little bit, but they have their preferences, but they're kind of just in their comfort zone, you know, you can maybe get them something interesting. Get them a flex pen, get them a stub nib or something like that. You could end up expanding their horizons a little bit with a pen that they already like that maybe is just a slightly different writing experience, or it's a color that you know they don't have that could kind of round out maybe a collection of theirs or something. So that could be a possibility. You don't have to start from the ground up with something you know, as a gift, but you could get them just a variant of what you already know they like. You could go, you know, really go off a limb and get like a custom pen commissioned from, you know, an independent maker like Edison, Herbert, Carolina. Maybe you could do that. It might take a while though. A lot of them have pretty big wait lists. So you may want to plan way ahead, or if you happen to be near a pen show, a lot of times they have stuff ready to buy at pen shows. If there's something like that that is close enough to what you think would really ring their bell, you know, you're going to pay a little more for these pens. So depending on what your budget is, it may just not be very feasible, and the timeline and stuff like that. You know, a lot of these custom commissioned pens might not be unusual for them to have a year-long wait list, maybe longer. So, you know, plan ahead. But hey, it's an option. You can certainly go with something vintage. If you know that they're a Goulet customer, we don't carry anything vintage. So you could certainly go the route of vintage. You have a lot of possibilities there, but it's also like even more of a deep well in terms of what it is you might be looking for. But you could look for kind of some staples like a Parker 51, an Esterbrook J, maybe a Schaefer Snorkel or Schaefer Triumph, Waterman 52. you know, there's some of these that are pretty well established staple pens of old that could be kind of fun for their own collection. You didn't ask about these, you kind of asked about pens, but I'll expand your question just a little bit. But peripherals can make really good gifts, especially for somebody that has a pretty good pen collection. Things like pen cases. You can almost never have too many pen cases because chances are if they're really into pens, they might fill them up or want to transport pens in different fashions. They can reorganize, whatever. So pen cases are pretty good gift for somebody who's really into pens. Maybe sealing wax. So that's kind of like, not a lot of people do sealing wax. Maybe wouldn't get into it themselves, but they may be intrigued if they're writing a lot. You know, what the heck? They might write a letter every now and then and put sealing wax on it. That's just kind of cool and kind of novel. You know, I've got some super old videos on sealing wax and how to do it. So if you get them sealing wax, point them to some, you know, atrociously produced Goulet videos of old. They'll at least get the right education and be able to do it. So it's really kind of cool. So that's something. Obviously ink, you could go with ink. You may not have an idea what's in their collection, but you might be able to snoop around and find what they're interested in, or at least you have a general idea what color it is. So you could get something similar, or maybe a little flashier. Paper is always a safe bet. You know, it's a consumable. So even if they already have paper, well, if you get them more paper, that's not a bad thing. And they just have more paper. They can not have to buy paper anytime soon. So that could be cool. So if they have a specific format of notebook, you know, they like, if they really like Leuchtturm bullet journals or something like that, you could get them another one in maybe a different color. Maybe they could use that in a different format of some kind. You know, a Midori, like Traveler's Notebook. Sorry, I keep wanting to call it Midori Traveler's Notebook. They changed that a couple years ago. Still getting used to it. Traveler's Company, Traveler's Notebook. They split off. Anyway, same company, just owned by different things, different brands, whatever. Traveler's Notebook could be interesting. So you got some options there. You know, there's like ink blotters, you know, so it could be a little desk accessory, kind of accessory, you know, not something you might likely have. You know, cleaning kit, pen flush, brass sheets, silicone grease, ink syringes, bulb syringe. These are all peripherals that will definitely enhance their pen hobby that they may already have, but wouldn't mind having more of them. So they could keep a bulb syringe in their desk at work and have one at home. You know what I mean? So like these could be good gifts that could help enhance their writing experience. And there's also a couple of books that we have, like whether it's a handwriting book or like Fountain Pens of the World, Fountain Pens of Japan, you know, Indy Lambrow's books that we have could be interesting. You know, there's a nice like coffee table type books. So that can enhance their writing experience as well. Kind of a last resort here, you could always ask them if they have a wish list built on our site. They can always share it with you because we have a shareable wish list function. It's not like a registry, so they can't see when something has been bought. So there's a possibility it could be duplicated or they might have already bought it themselves. But hey, it can at least, you know, if they already have one built, you can just say, hey, share your wish list with me, and at least I can get an idea of what I want to get you. And then there's always the old fallback gift card. So you can do a gift card at your favorite retailer, which hopefully is us, but it might not be, and that's okay. Or you can, you know, just give them cold hard cash too. It's always a fallback as well. But either way, it's cool that you're thinking about the pen people in your life, and you have lots and lots of options, even if you don't know specifically what it is that they want. You have a lot of options. All right, got 2 ink questions. One is from Vee F on Facebook. What are the main ink qualities? Are there objective or quantifiable ones, or are they all subjective? I find that I like thick, saturated, wet inks. Or is that even a possible combination? Can ink properties be independent of the pen one uses them in? My recent musings fueled by my unorthodox preferences. Well, Vee, you are not alone. We are all just a culmination of different musings and unorthodox preferences. That's why we all end up in the pen world, right? So like all things fountain pen, ink qualities are going to be a blend of objective and subjective. That's what makes this hobby so interesting and colorful, yet also so challenging at times. I think there's certainly objective things about ink, such as pH level, viscosity, dye content, permanence, dry time, perhaps. These are all measurable, definable things in a controlled setting. You know, think about science. It has to be, you know, controlled, repeatable, predictable. there are aspects to these that can definitely happen. Now, technically, there's nothing mythological going on about fountain pens. Really, all of it is scientific and technological to a point. But the number of variables that you're going to have are going to be so great in the entire writing experience that how much of a difference these objective things actually result in your end writing experience is going to vary quite a bit. And that's what makes it so tough. That's where the subjectivity really comes in. Some of the more subjective aspects of it are things like saturation. Like technically, the dye content should make a difference, but what somebody calls saturation of an ink could vary based on the pen, the flow, the paper, all these different things. Really is up to interpretation. Shading, something a high degree of shading, low degree of shading, what even is shading? Is there color variation in the shade? Is that shading? Or is it sheen? Is that part of shading? You know, so there's a lot of things that are commonly known in vernacular around ink properties that are maybe not so easy to define. There's no scientific measurement that I've seen for how much an ink shades, right? Ink flow, technically you can measure viscosity. Does that actually make a difference in terms of how wet an ink feels on the page? Because there's so many factors. There's the nib, the feed, the paper itself, the absorbency of the paper, all these things fit into that. Just the feel, the writing aspect, the feel, different ink can make a pen feel different. Like literally you can take a pen, same ink, paper, person, same pen, paper, and person. You can use two different inks and it can feel very different. How do you measure that? What is it that's making it do that? That's really tough, rather subjective. And so I think even if we objectively were to rate or test all of these aspects in some controllable way, they wouldn't really perform so similarly or be predictably in like real life scenarios that people are actually using them, because there are so many factors. So I think it's largely going to be kind of an unquantifiable, as it has been kind of since the creation of ink, right? I think some people find, a specific pen and ink to pair perfectly. That's kind of like the holy grail that we're all looking for, right? They maybe not prefer to use that specific pen or ink apart from one another. But I think part of what makes this hobby so interesting and so intriguing is that it's really an exploration. You get to experiment with mixing so many different combinations of pen, ink, paper, nibs, all these different things. And you get to discover what you like and how you feel. And those preferences can change as well, and that's okay. So I think largely you're looking, we've been doing the fountain pen thing for 10 years now, which is not, that long, but it also kind of is. We have tried to find a number of very objective things to determine what is useful in talking about ink. And largely what we found is it's not a purely scientific endeavor. Much like many things that are related to color, thinking about clothing or paint, interior paint for your house. Like, there's no scientific measurement for how much you're going to like a color in your bathroom. There might be some scientific things you can talk about, how well the paint covers or whatever, but there's gonna be a lot of subjectivity to the whole process, right? So fountain pens kind of fall into that. And I think that, if you kind of take that exploratory mindset towards your ink, that you're gonna really enjoy the process more than you will trying to find like some perfectly scientific approach towards it. But it's really up to you. I've seen some people that have done some really, really interesting ink reviews, taking a very scientific approach. And I'm always like, like chromatography paper and like the whole deal, measuring pH levels, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is really interesting how scientific this is. What does it actually mean in terms of how much I'm going to enjoy this ink? That's the tougher question to answer. And that is what makes this so fun. So colorful of a hobby, if you will. It's terrible, I know. All right. R Poetic on Twitter asked, inks for colorblind people. What would you suggest for someone who can't see 90% of reds and greens, or for one of the other kinds of color deficiency? Okay, so this is going to be a very difficult question for me to answer because I think colorblindness is so personal, much as all things preferential, especially things involving our eyes, that's going to be really tough. So I won't be able to make really specific recommendations, I'm sorry to say, because of the different types of color blindness and the severity. I did a little research on it. I've actually been asked about this several times before. I've never really been at a place of understanding or time or whatever, what have you, to research just color blindness in general. I am not colorblind personally, but I know people who are. We have people in this company who are colorblind to varying degrees. So I did a little research. This is just online research. I don't know the validity of it, so forgive me if any of it's wrong, but it's what I was able to understand in my limited time. Apparently 8% of men are, have some form of color blindness, and 0.5% of women have some form of color blindness. Apparently that has to do with like the XY chromosome thing, just the number of cones that people have in their eyes. Men are just more prone to color blindness. There you go. So there's a couple different types. So there's red-green color blindness, blue-yellow color blindness, and total color blindness. So if you have the red-green, much as you do here, Art Poetic, it's my understanding that you have a difficult time seeing red and green color. And that amount can vary. Like you mentioned, you're 90%. Other people, if you have the blue-yellow, you struggle with those. And then total, obviously, you're kind of seeing things in grayscale. So my recommendation, as it would be for anyone, is ultimately use whatever makes you happy. Whatever looks good to you, to your eyes, go for it. I think maybe at a previous time in our history, depending on your culture, it was maybe considered socially acceptable to use certain colors sometimes and not acceptable to use other colors other times. And that may still be the case in certain specific scenarios, maybe legal settings or certain governmental documents where they require a blue or black ink or something like that. Okay, sure, you can just go with something pretty safe. Go with a blue-black ink of some kind that's in the name. Doesn't really matter what it looks like to your eyes. You're just using it to get a job done. But if you are looking for something for your own enjoyment, which I think largely for fountain pen use these days, we're using colors for our own enjoyment and what we think looks good to us. I think you use whatever looks good to you. And if you have a hard time seeing reds and greens, maybe just don't use reds and greens, because if you're not really seeing the full effect of it anyway, unless you just like the way that it looks to you. We have one customer of ours who I remember very distinctly. I won't go into deep detail about anything about them or who they are, but they had some color blindness, and they would just try all different types of ink because ultimately they wanted to see what looked good in person to their eyes. And it, maybe was some kind of, color that other people might not have chosen, but it looked really good to them. So they would try a lot of different colors, and that was their process. So that said, I don't really have any good like red or green recommendations for you if you have a hard time seeing red and green, because I personally, with my eyes, I don't know what a 90% red and green color deficiency looks like. So I don't know, and I haven't really talked in detail with enough people who are colorblind in these specific various ways to be able to make good recommendations. So by all means, if anyone out there in YouTube land or podcast land or whoever, if you have any experience with color blindness and you have some recommendations, by all means. It's my understanding that more saturated colors are better and more distinct. And then going things with maybe a lesser degree of shading might be better, so bolder colors, things like that, but that by no means has to necessarily be the case. You've inspired me to research this just a little bit more, which is part of what I like about Q&A is I'll get a question like this and I'm like, color blindness, we do get asked about that from time to time. I am a little bit ignorant on that. Let me research that. I may not be an expert on it, which I apologize if you're looking for expertise. I'm just a humble pen guy, so you're not necessarily going to get expertise from me. I'll just give you the best of what I know. So for me, this is the best of what I know right now about color blindness, but I'd be interested to know in the comments if this is something worth exploring a little deeper, because I'm intrigued. I know enough to be intrigued, which is where I think I'll leave that question. My last question of the week is a business question from Miguel R on Facebook. which company do you wish you would see more from? In your opinion, which company isn't using the momentum they build to their advantage? Very interesting question. A little bit of a slippery slope because it sounds like I'm kind of critiquing or maybe criticizing, maybe some of the companies that I represent or work with. But I think I can blanket that statement by saying I pretty much wish I could see more from everyone because I love fountain pens, and I think that part of the coolest thing about it is the innovation that you see. So I would love to see more from everybody. Specifically, I think Pilot and Namiki, they make a lot of stuff that's just not even in the U.S. I would love to see some of the things that they already make offered in the U.S. or have made in the past. Maybe for the Japan market only for the US. Seemingly an easy thing to propose, but the thing that I've learned by dealing with more and more pen manufacturers is, much like anything in life, the things that we're not as close to, it's a little more complicated than we probably understand it to be. So when we're looking at, offering more whatever models or more whatever it might be, colors of given pens, there's probably some good underlying reason as to why we're not seeing that. Because this may sound crazy, but generally speaking, pen companies want to make products that excite us and that we want to buy. That's a general rule. May not be the case for everybody. Might be some other people's motivation, or they may not have the capacity to do it, but generally the desire is there to make things that the pen community really wants. Now, that may not be what every single idea that every single individual wants. They may have to be practical. And that's kind of where we're going down, is maybe we're slipping a little further down into the slope of, what are my preferences that I would want to see that may not be practical, but what would I want to do? And that's all well and good. But where your question went kind of in the second portion of it is which company isn't using the momentum to their advantage. I think more of the connotation of your question is, who do I want to see more from in the not so much in that there maybe is like a specific interest that isn't being met, but maybe that they aren't utilizing their own potential, their own momentum. And that's a really tough question for me to answer because I think it's not really something that I think like some company in their totality is underutilizing their potential. I think there may be certain opportunities at certain times for things to be released a certain way that could be better in my limited view. But usually when those situations come up where I'm like, oh man, why didn't they make more of this pen, or why didn't they do this differently? And then when I talk closer to the manufacturer, I understand, I'm like, oh, okay, so you wanted to offer this in a greater, whatever. I'm gonna make up an example. Let's say, there's a scenario with a manufacturer, they wanted to release a new color that has to be like anodized or colored in some way. But that specific coloration or anodizing process, because of environmental regulations, are not something that they can do in-house. They have to have it done somewhere else that's set up and specializes in that. But they did that, and because of the nature, anodization is rather complicated, like calculus is involved. And I took like 4 weeks of calculus in high school, and I was like, I'm out. No way am I doing this. It's all proofs and memorization. I'm like, nope. So very complicated stuff. Anyway, so very complicated process. So maybe they get one shipment, and then the second shipment they get back, color's all jacked up, or something crazy happens with the finish, and the thing, like the number that they were trying to make is cut in half. So all of a sudden they got to change their strategy. An entire market doesn't get any pens, or maybe gets a handful of pens, and it's a complete different scenario than what they set out to do. That kind of stuff happens all the time on the manufacturing side of things. I think way more than we realize by the time like an end product ends up in our hands. So I'm much more empathetic to that process. The more I've toured 8 different pen factories now across 3 different continents, and I have an equal amount of respect and humility by visiting all of them, because the amount of technical knowledge engineering and thoughtfulness that goes into any fountain pen is rather impressive, and something that goes beyond my own current capabilities. So for me, I'm not going to be overly critical about any given pen company about like what potential I see that they could have, because I really feel like a lot of them are giving it their best effort. That said, that's my perspective, especially the ones that I work closely with. I'm really seeing the hood lifted up. There's a couple of pen companies that I don't carry in our store, or maybe have just less of a perspective, that I don't mean to critique. I just kind of raise the question of, I wonder if there's more potential for these companies, that I would have to believe, especially if it's somebody that we're not working with. Not that we're like the end all be all by any means, but obviously I, with my viewpoint, would feel that there is more potential that could be done if there's a brand that we're not carrying, and then we started carrying it. I have a strong impact on what potential there could be for that brand, at least in the spheres of influence, what we're able to control. Maybe not so much in their grand scheme of things. But some of the brands that we don't carry, or don't carry anymore, I should say, that I think have potential, have brand equity behind their names and a lot of history to go on, but just kind of aren't where I feel they should be. Waterman, Parker, Cross, Schaefer. I think all of those brands could be more, at least in the US. Some of them I think are bigger overseas. Some, from what I understand, like Parker is like blowing up in China, so I hear. I would love to see that happening more, just kind of globally, and just kind of like in the company's whole perspective, especially with these ones being that these are all American founded companies, that now largely aren't very American at all, in terms of either their ownership or where they're made. So I think there is definitely potential for those. It would be kind of cool, just historically, to see these companies kind of revived in a way that I feel they should be. But that's just my limited viewpoint. I think Esterbrook is an iconic brand that I look forward to seeing more from them. Now that's a brand that is being revived from the folks. So they're owned by the folks at Kenro. They're the ones who I went to Italy with. So by no means critiquing like, why don't we have more Esterbrooks? It's complicated, right? Like they're trying to basically build that. The brand is there, but the pens aren't there. So they're trying to build these pens from the ground up again, with all of the historical stuff. They don't have any of the historical tools or like any of that stuff. Like the brand went away in like the 60s, 70s. Tried to be revived again, didn't quite take. This is version 3.0 here. So it's complicated, but I think there's potential there. I think the Kenro, I think they're good folks to be able to do that with that brand. So I'm curious to see what they do with that. I think there's potential there, much more in like the optimistic kind of way that I'm thinking. But to really wrap this all up and to make it so that hopefully no one gets too mad at me, I will critique and say that I think the biggest company that could capitalize on their opportunity and their potential is Goulet pens. Part of it is I just have the best perspective on what we're doing, but we've been focused, we've been growing for 10 straight years. I think we have the potential to make Goulet branded pens, ink, whatever. We've made some products, we've done some proprietary things. I think we have the passion, the enthusiasm. We lack some of the engineering and design and manufacturing expertise to be able to physically make our own products. But to be quite honest, I think, you are your own worst critic. I look around and we have a great team. I don't mean this to critique anything we're doing, because I think we're doing great in a lot of ways. But I think in terms of, untapped potential, I think we actually have a lot of untapped potential that I think we could do something about, given time. I don't think that we're behind or that we should be any further along than we are right now. I just see it as we have momentum that we could build upon in the future. So I think that's, because of that, it's always, developing products. We've done some, and that have been successful and helped the community. I think there's more that we could do. It's just not our core focus, so it ends up being kind of a back burner project all the time. So I think of all the companies, ours would be the one that could benefit the most. All right. So that said, my question of the week for you all this week is, if you could have a pen made out of any material, what would it be? Maybe it's like the cherry tree that George Washington cut down, or what, I don't know. Anything, dream it up. If you're like the foil from Apollo 13 command module, or whatever it is, go ahead and dream big. I'm just really curious where your head is at in terms of what you'd like to see a pen made out of. The Shroud of Turin, I don't know. Holy Grail. Literally a Holy Grail pen made from the Holy Grail. That would be kind of cool, right? I mean, why not have the ultimate Holy Grail pen? That's my answer. I would have a pen made out of the Holy Grail. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to do that. That's actually a gross spot. I couldn't damage the Holy Grail and make it into a pen. Never mind. I retract my answer. Forgive me. Okay. Maybe just something a little more humble, perhaps. I don't know. I'll give it some more thought. I'm totally backpedaling on my own answer. But either way, let me know your thought process in the comments. You can check out, I really didn't show you a lot of products today. It was just all me talking. But you can check out some of the things that I've talked about today on gouletpens.com. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're an audio podcast listener, I want to say a special hello to you all. I've just been thinking about, I listen to a lot of audio podcasts myself, and I know we're basically just kind of repurposing our normal Q&A. And I've asked people that are avid, Q&A audio only listeners, and they say, it's really pretty good. You guys do a pretty good job with it. And I say, okay, that's great. But I was a little hint of like, I feel a little guilty that we're just, we're not producing it specifically only for the audio, but that's okay. It's still finding value, and that's cool. But that's on my mind. I'm like, should we do an audio podcast? I'm like, when the heck would I do an audio podcast? A whole separate thing. I don't know. Random little extra tidbit there. If you have thoughts about that, drop it in the YouTube comments, whatever. Send my team an email. We'd love to know your feedback. That's all I got for y'all this week. Hope you have a great weekend and a fantastic rest of your week. Thanks for watching, and right on.